Today we're looking at one of the kings of ancient Israel. His name was Josiah. And Josiah is called in Sunday school called Josiah the boy king because uniquely he came to reign when he was 8 years old. Now, when Josiah became king, the worship of the one true God had seriously declined in Israel. For decades, previous kings had led the way into idolatry, and the temple of God had fallen into disrepair. So when Josiah was 16 years old, he set his heart, it says, on pursuing the one true God. And one result of that is he decided to get the temple of God back in shape again. Well, during the construction project, they found a scroll that changed Josiah's life. This scroll was part of the Bible that had actually been lost, and it spelled out God's commandments for his people, much of which had been forgotten by the people and neglected over the years. You know, back then the Bible was kind of rare because it had to be copied by hand, but we have plenty of Bibles today. You know, a lot of us have Bibles on our phone, and so I want to see what we can learn here about reading the Bible. And the first principle we learn from Josiah's story is to read the Bible to inform our reality. The Bible informs our perspective on reality. All of us have this view of reality. We have assumptions that we make about what's real or what's true. But real reality is the way God sees things, and He's communicated that to us in the Bible. Now, when this book of God's law was found, the king suddenly gained a new view of reality. As he read it, he now understood what God actually expected of his people, but he also realized that the people were far out of step with God. Perhaps the most serious realization he made as he read this scroll were the consequences spelled out in the law of God for disobedience. It said that if Israel stopped obeying and serving God, that they would become oppressed by the enemies, and eventually they would be expelled from their homeland. So now Josiah had this totally different and now accurate view of the situation, of his life and of his people. And likewise, we need to let the Bible define reality for us. Again, we have all of our own ideas about what's real, about what's true. A lot of that is what we got from our family or from our friends or just from the culture around us. But to be honest, a lot of that is just made up stuff. We like to believe what we want to believe in order to paint a picture of life that we're comfortable with. But you know, reality is not defined by us, it's defined by God. And so the Bible gives us wisdom and insight about life. It gives us this true picture of reality because it's from God. And not just in abstract or philosophical terms, but in how to actually live our lives day by day. Now, there's something else we see from Josiah's example when he found this book, and he teaches us to read the Bible to reset our priorities. See, centuries before Josiah's time, God had made a covenant with Israel on Mount Sinai, and that covenant governed what it meant to be God's people. When Josiah read the book of the law, he realized that that covenant had long been forgotten and neglected. And so Josiah gathered all the leadership and all the people of the whole nation around, and he read the scroll to them. And then he pledged to be obedient and faithful to the terms of that covenant, and he led all the other people that gathered at the same time to do that as well, so that the relationship with God became a priority for everyone again. That's also why we read the Bible today. The Bible cuts to our deepest internal thoughts and desires, and because it speaks so powerfully to the inner person, it helps us to see where our priorities might be wrong, and it brings us back to the things that matter to God again. And so as you read it, let it speak to that. Let it reset the direction of your heart and of your life. Remember, Josiah was just 16 when he set his heart on pursuing God. And he was just 26 when he led the nation to renew its priorities. And so you need to understand that young people are capable of doing great things for God. You're capable of responding to God with great passion and great commitment, just like Josiah did long ago. Now, it's one thing to understand the truth. It's one thing even to say what your priorities are. That's all really good. But that's no guarantee that our lives will change unless we follow through with the next step. And ultimately, Josiah's example encourages us that we read the Bible to direct our actions. See, Josiah didn't just have this big pep rally where he gathered a big crowd and stirred up everybody's emotions. In the end, the Bible also led him to act. So 2 Chronicles 34, verse 33 says, Josiah removed all the detestable idols from the entire land of Israel and required everyone to worship the Lord their God. And throughout the rest of his lifetime, they did not turn away from the Lord, the God of their ancestors. Now that seems like a really simple statement on the face of it when it says Josiah removed all the idols from the land. But that would have been an enormous undertaking. What's spelled out there in one verse, in another place that describes this same passage, In 2 Kings chapter 23, it takes 17 verses to say that same thing because it goes into detail and tells us there were these large numbers of idolatrous priests who had to be removed from influence in the land. There were countless pagan shrines throughout the capital city of Jerusalem. In fact, in all of the outlying countryside, Josiah traveled far and wide, demolishing idolatrous centers of worship throughout the entire land. And that could not have been easy because pagan worship had become part of the national culture for the last 2 generations. It had the loyalty of so many people. Josiah must have faced tremendous resistance to that task, and yet he was obedient to what he read in God's word, even when it was hard. And likewise, we need to let the Bible dictate how to conduct our lives. I can't tell you how many people I've encountered over the years who say they're Christians, who say they love Jesus, but they'll just pick and choose from the Bible what they want to put into practice or what they just want to blow off. But wherever the Bible's clear about how to live, we have to let it call the shots. So here's Josiah. Even as a young man, he was a great leader because when he read the Bible, he let it change his perspective, his priorities, his actions. That's what made him wise beyond his years. And I want to challenge you to commit yourself to God's word, to read it, to learn it, to study it. Let it make you wise. Let it speak to you. Let it talk to you. Take it to heart. Submit yourself to it, and then put it into practice. Build your life around it so that it can also make you great.